subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The sound of the door crashing open echoed through the lavish mansion, sending a sharp chill down Nathan's spine. He hadn't expected his father to return this soon. His thoughts were still a tangled mess from the heated argument that had happened earlier that day. "Get out!" his father, Richard Bennett, barked in a low, icy voice. He stepped into the grand foyer with a stern look etched across his face. The towering figure of the billionaire patriarch seemed even more imposing in the dimly lit hallway. Nathan, sitting on the leather armchair by the window, stood up abruptly, his heart pounding against his chest. He'd never seen his father so furious. "What's going on?" Nathan started to speak, but his father raised a hand to silence him. The air in the room seemed to freeze, tension thickening with every second. "You're going to marry her," Richard announced, his voice as cold as the marble floors beneath them. Nathan's mind couldn't process the words. Who? What was he talking about? He blinked several times, hoping to shake off the fog that seemed to have settled over his thoughts. "What do you mean?" Nathan finally managed, his voice trembling slightly. Richard's face darkened, his jaw clenching in irritation. "You'll marry the beggar tomorrow," he said, his tone firm as though there was no room for argument. Nathan's mouth went dry. "A beggar?" He looked at his father, his mind racing. "Dad, you can't be serious. What do you mean? Why? What are you talking about?" Richard's eyes narrowed, the glint of power in them unmistakable. "You'll do as I say, Nathan. There's no discussion. You're marrying her. I've already arranged everything." Nathan felt his stomach twist. He had heard rumors about his father's decisions, but this was a level of cruelty he never imagined. A beggar? His mind raced, trying to grasp what was happening, but all he could think about was how surreal it seemed. "Who is she?" Nathan asked, his voice shaking. The thought of being forced into a marriage with someone from the lowest of society was beyond his comprehension, but Richard merely smirked, the smile devoid of warmth. "You'll find out soon enough," Richard replied. "Don't test me, Nathan. You will obey this time." The words hit Nathan like a blow to the chest. His father had always been demanding, but never like this. This was different. There was an undercurrent of something darker, something personal. This wasn't about business. This wasn't about some merger or a deal. This was pure control, a twisted power play in the hands of a man who thought he owned everything, including his son. Richard turned to leave, his footsteps echoing on the hard floors. "I expect you at the ceremony tomorrow," he added, without looking back. Nathan stood there, frozen in place. His heart was racing, his thoughts in turmoil. He wanted to scream, to demand an explanation. But what good would it do? His father had made his decision, and nothing ever changed Richard Bennett's mind once it was made. The words, "tomorrow," echoed in his head, filling him with dread. What was he walking into? Who was this woman? And why would his father do this? He paced back and forth, his mind a whirlwind of questions. The more he thought about it, the more surreal it seemed. A beggar. His father was making him marry a beggar. Minutes turned to hours, and the sinking feeling in his gut refused to leave. He knew there had to be more to this than what his father was saying. Richard Bennett didn't make decisions like this without a deeper reason. But what could that reason be? Nathan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he was being dragged into something far bigger than a mere marriage. By the time Nathan finally went to bed, his mind was a mess. He lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, running over every possibility in his mind. What kind of woman would be forced into a marriage with someone like him? What was his father's game here? And most importantly, what did this have to do with the dark secret that his father had always kept hidden? Nathan had known for years that Richard had secrets, secrets that never saw the light of day. He had always tried to dig deeper, but his father kept a tight grip on everything. The truth always seemed just out of reach. The next morning, Nathan was a bundle of nerves, still no closer to understanding his father's motives. He reluctantly dressed in the formal suit his father had chosen for him the night before. It felt suffocating, the weight of the suit mirroring the weight of the situation. When the car arrived to take him to the ceremony, Nathan felt his stomach tighten. There were no words exchanged during the drive, only the sound of the tires humming against the pavement. His mind was too consumed with questions to even look out the window. The car stopped in front of a small, run-down church on the outskirts of the city. Nathan's confusion grew as he stepped out of the vehicle. This wasn't a lavish venue. It wasn't the kind of place where billionaires made grand entrances. This was a modest building, one that didn't belong in his world. As he walked toward the church, he spotted a woman standing at the entrance. She was dressed in a simple, faded dress, her hair disheveled. Nathan's eyes narrowed. Was this her? Was this the woman his father had arranged for him to marry? She seemed so out of place, so ordinary. He had expected someone with at least a semblance of grace, someone who might belong in the world of wealth and power. But as Nathan got closer, he saw the look in her eyes, a deep sadness mixed with something else. Fear? Was she afraid of him, of this situation? He was about to take another step forward when the door of the church slammed open. The sound was deafening, and Nathan froze. It wasn't just the noise that made him stop in his tracks. It was the sight of his father standing in the doorway, his expression colder than ever. Behind him was a man, tall, muscular, with a hard face that looked like it had seen too many battles. "You're late," Richard said, his voice void of any warmth. "Get inside." Nathan wanted to protest, to demand answers, but his father's icy gaze shut him down before he could speak. With a deep breath, he walked inside, his heart hammering in his chest. He had no idea what was about to unfold, but he knew one thing for sure: everything was about to change. Nathan's hands trembled as he stepped into the dimly lit church, the echo of his footsteps blending with the low hum of his racing heart. The wooden pews lined the room like silent spectators to an event neither of them understood. The air was thick with a tension that clung to his skin. He had walked into the unknown, into something much darker than a mere wedding. Richard, his father, stood at the front of the church, arms crossed, a stern frown on his face. He wasn't there to offer any semblance of warmth. There was no welcoming smile, no fatherly comfort. The billionaire patriarch was nothing more than a shadow. Now an enigma draped in expensive suits and dark intentions. "Father," Nathan began, but his voice faltered. He didn't know how to address him. Words seemed insufficient given the situation. "Quiet," Richard snapped, his tone sharp, cutting through the silence. "We don't have time for questions, Nathan. This is happening whether you like it or not. Now, stand still and observe." Nathan could feel his pulse pounding in his throat. The woman, the beggar, stood at the altar, her back turned to him. Her ragged dress, faded and worn, seemed out of place in this ornate building. She was a stark contrast to everything Nathan had ever known. Her hair was unkempt, falling in wild waves down her back. Her posture was stiff, as if she had been told to stand there and wait for something she couldn't escape. A cold, unsettling. A feeling washed over Nathan. His father had told him nothing about this woman. Why was he being forced to marry her? What could she possibly have to do with the dark secret his father was hiding? Nathan needed answers, but the more he tried to grasp the situation, the more slippery it became. The priest, a man Nathan didn't recognize, stepped forward, looking at him with a serious expression. "We'll begin shortly," he said, his voice low and quiet, almost as if he too was uncertain of the proceedings. "This is your last chance to speak." Nathan opened his mouth, wanting to scream, to demand some semblance of an explanation. But the words stuck in his throat. He couldn't speak, not with his father's cold eyes watching him, not when everything about this moment felt wrong. And then, the beggar, The woman his father had ordered him to marry turned around. Nathan's breath caught in his throat as their eyes met. She was young, much younger than he had expected. Her eyes were a dark brown, filled with a depth of emotion that confused him. There was fear, yes, but there was something else too, a quiet strength. The kind of strength you don't expect to see in someone who has known nothing but hardship. For a moment, Nathan didn't know what to do. His mind raced, but the words didn't come. He wanted to ask her name. He wanted to ask her why she was here. Why was she the one his father had chosen for him? But before he could form another thought, Richard spoke again, his voice like ice. "This is not a time for questions, Nathan. It's time for you to do what you're told." Nathan's eyes never left the woman as the priest began the ceremony. His mind spun, the confusion overwhelming him. He glanced back at his father, who stood there unmoving, an unreadable expression on his face. "Do you, Nathan Bennett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the priest asked, his words heavy in the silence. Nathan didn't respond. His mind was a mess of conflicting emotions. This couldn't be real. This wasn't what he wanted. He had no idea who this woman was, and yet his father expected him to marry her, to bind himself to her for reasons he couldn't even begin to understand. The priest's gaze lingered on him, waiting for an answer. Richard's presence behind him loomed like a shadow, his coldness pressing down on Nathan's shoulders. "Answer him," Richard barked, his voice like a whip. Nathan began, but before he could finish, the beggar, the woman, stepped forward, her hands trembling at her sides. She lifted her head, meeting his eyes with a quiet defiance that sent a jolt through him. "I do," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I do, even if I don't understand why." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment Nathan felt the weight of her gaze on him. There was something so raw in her expression, a mix of resignation and resolve. It was as if she had already accepted her fate, but there was an unspoken question in her eyes. What was this all for? Before Nathan could respond, his father spoke again, his voice low but firm. "You'll follow through with this. This marriage will happen. It has to. No one can know the truth. No one can ever find out." The finality in his father's words sent a chill down Nathan's spine. "What truth?" he wanted to scream. But again, the words didn't come. The ceremony continued, and Nathan found himself caught in the whirlwind of his father's will, his own confusion, and the strange woman who stood before him. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story, but he knew one thing for sure. Nothing about this was what it seemed. The days after the forced ceremony passed in a blur for Nathan. He went through the motions, getting dressed, sitting at dinner, answering questions that weren't really questions at all, just commands veiled in politeness. His father had made it clear. This marriage was a means to an end, a chapter in a story Nathan didn't yet understand. His thoughts, however, refused to settle, and every night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the woman, his wife, haunting his thoughts. Her name was Eliza. At least, that was what she had told him when they were alone for a brief moment. After the ceremony, Eliza. That's all he knew about her. He hadn't dared to ask more questions. What good would it do? She had answered in a quiet, almost defeated tone, as if she had already accepted the fate that had been thrust upon her. The next few days were spent in silence. Eliza kept to herself, and Nathan was lost in his own mind. He wanted to confront his father, to demand answers, but every time he considered it, the cold, implacable look in his father's eyes held him back. Richard Bennett was a man who didn't need to speak to assert his authority. Nathan could feel the weight of his father's presence even when he wasn't around. One evening, a week after the ceremony, Nathan sat in the drawing room, alone for once. He couldn't take it any longer. The silence, the tension, it was suffocating him. He had to talk to Eliza. He needed to understand why she was here, why his father had chosen her, and what role she played in this twisted narrative. He found her in the garden, sitting on a worn-out bench, staring at the flowers that barely bloomed in the late autumn chill. She had removed the elaborate wedding dress after the ceremony, now dressed in simple clothes. She looked out of place in the grand estate, like a lost soul that didn't belong. Eliza didn't hear him approach, and for a moment Nathan stood there watching her, unsure of what to say. He had never been good at this, the talking part, the reaching out. His world had always been one of power, wealth, and control, not vulnerability. "Do you ever wonder why you're here?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking the silence. Eliza startled, her head snapping up as if she hadn't expected him. Her face softened, a mixture of surprise and wariness in her eyes. She seemed hesitant, as though she were trying to decide whether to answer him or keep the distance between them. "You want answers, don't you?" she said, her voice soft but steady. There was an underlying sorrow in her words, one that seemed to carry years of pain. Nathan sat beside her, not caring how out of place he felt in the moment. "I don't understand. Why did my father—" "Your father doesn't do things without reason?" Eliza interrupted, her eyes fixed on the flowers. "You already know that." Nathan's frustration grew. "I don't know anything. I don't know why you're here. I don't know what this marriage is supposed to mean. All I know is that I've been thrown into something that I didn't choose, something I don't understand." She turned to him then, her gaze piercing. "You think I chose this, that I had a say in any of this? This isn't a choice for either of us, Nathan. We're both pawns in his game. The only difference is, I've been playing it longer." Her words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Nathan stared at her, trying to piece together the pieces of the puzzle that seemed to slip further from his grasp the more he learned. "Playing it longer? What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. He felt a cold chill seep into his bones, the implications of her words starting to sink in. Eliza didn't answer right away. She stood up and walked toward the garden's edge, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Nathan followed her, his mind racing. "Eliza, please," he said. "I need to know. Why are you here? What does my father want with you?" She looked back at him, her face pale, her expression a mixture of pain and resignation. "I don't know if I can tell you. I don't know if I should. But maybe you should find out for yourself." Nathan's confusion deepened. "Find out for myself? What does that mean?" She hesitated before speaking again, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Your father's secrets are buried deep, Nathan. And the truth is, those secrets might just cost us both everything." Her words were a cryptic warning, and for a moment Nathan wondered if he had made a mistake. Had he pushed too hard? But he couldn't stop now. He needed answers, and he needed them from her. "Eliza," he began, his voice more forceful now. "Tell me what's going on. Tell me why you're here. What does he want?" She shook her head slowly, as if weighing the consequences of revealing too much. "I can't tell you everything, but I'll tell you this. Your father has made enemies, dangerous ones, and I'm the key to everything." Nathan's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, the key?" She turned away, her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world had fallen upon them. "I was never supposed to be here. I was supposed to be somewhere else, but things got complicated. Your father's enemies, they know about me. They know what I know." Nathan stepped forward, his mind spinning. "What do you know? Eliza?" "Please, I know things about your father that no one else does," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know his darkest secret. The thing he's been hiding for years, the thing that's going to destroy him." The words hit Nathan like a physical blow. "You know his secret?" Eliza nodded. "Yes. And that's why he married you to me. He needed to make sure that no one else found out. And that includes you. Nathan could hardly breathe. What is it? What's the secret? Eliza looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and pity. If you want to know, Nathan, you're going to have to make a choice. You can walk away, pretend none of this is happening, and live the life your father wants you to live. Or you can dig deeper. But be warned, some truths are better left buried. Nathan's mind was reeling. His father's secrets, Eliza's cryptic warnings. Everything felt like it was spiraling out of control. He had to know more, but at what cost? The silence stretched between them as Eliza turned back toward the garden, her face hidden behind the veil of her hair. Nathan stood there, frozen, his mind filled with questions he didn't know how to ask. What was his father hiding? What had he gotten himself into? And most terrifying of all, was Eliza telling the truth? The night air was colder than usual, a sharp bite to it that made Nathan shiver, despite the thick coat he had worn to the dinner table. He had barely touched his food, distracted by thoughts of Eliza and the cryptic warning she had given him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, standing in the garden, her face pale, her eyes filled with both fear and something else, something unspoken. Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that everything in his life, the carefully constructed life he had grown up with, was about to unravel. He couldn't let it go. His father had forced him into this marriage. But why? And what secret was Eliza hiding that could bring everything crashing down? The room around him seemed to grow smaller, the walls pressing in. He needed answers, and there was only one place where he could get them: his father's study. It was the only place where Nathan could find the truth, the only place where he could confront Richard Bennett, the man who had controlled everything in his life. Nathan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. His action went unnoticed by the servants bustling around the room. His father, as usual, was nowhere to be found. Richard had always been a man of business, always locked away in his private chambers, making decisions that affected everyone, but rarely discussing them. Tonight, Nathan was determined to break that silence. He walked quickly toward the study, each step driven by a growing urgency. His father's study was located at the far end of the estate, behind a door that no one but Richard was allowed to open. Nathan had never been inside. The thought of entering it, of trespassing into his father's sanctum, had always seemed too far-fetched, too rebellious. But tonight the rules didn't matter. His life had stopped making sense, and it was time for him to take control. As he reached the door to the study, his hand hesitated on the handle. A moment of doubt struck him. What if he found something he wasn't ready to know? What if his father caught him? Nathan pushed the thought aside. His curiosity and need for answers was stronger than the fear gnawing at him. He turned the handle and entered. The study was exactly as he had imagined it, large, dark, and filled with bookshelves that reached all the way up to the ceiling. The walls were lined with expensive art, and the room had the unmistakable scent of rich leather and old paper. Nathan felt like an intruder, but he didn't let it stop him. He was here for a reason. His eyes scanned the room, landing on the large wooden desk where Richard spent hours every day. Papers were stacked neatly, and various files were spread out across the surface. Nathan hesitated for only a moment before he walked up to the desk and began rifling through the papers. Nothing out of the ordinary at first, just business reports, spreadsheets, and accounts. But then something caught his eye. A thick, leather-bound folder sat at the corner of the desk. It was different from the other papers, older, more worn. Nathan's pulse quickened as he picked it up, his fingers trembling slightly as he opened it. Inside the first page was a family tree. Nathan's name was at the top, followed by his father's name, Richard Bennett. Beneath that there were names he didn't recognize, people he had never heard of. But as he scanned the page, his eyes stopped at one name: Eliza Bennett. Eliza. His wife, his forced bride. But how was she connected to this family tree? Was she related to his father? Nathan's heart raced as he turned the page. The next few pages contained personal documents, letters, photographs, and legal papers. The photographs were of people Nathan had never seen before, older photographs that looked decades old. One photo caught his eye. His father, Richard, standing next to a woman with dark eyes, her face partially obscured by a veil. It looked like a wedding photo, but Nathan didn't recognize her. She was beautiful, regal, and there was something deeply familiar about her features. The name at the bottom of the photo made his stomach drop. Lily Bennett. Nathan froze. Lily Bennett, his mother. He had never seen a photograph of her, not one this personal. She had died when he was just a child, and his father never spoke of her. To see her in a photo, to see the way his father had looked at her, it was like opening a door to a past he had been kept from. His fingers continued to flip through the pages. There were more photographs, some showing a young girl, Eliza, with the same haunting eyes as the woman in the veil. This was no coincidence. Eliza Bennett, she was Richard's daughter. But how? Nathan's mind raced. His father had kept this secret for so long. He had lied to everyone, even to his own son. Nathan could barely believe it. But the evidence was right in front of him. Eliza was not a beggar. She was his sister. But why had Richard forced him to marry her? And why hadn't anyone ever told him? As the truth began to settle in, Nathan felt a sinking sensation in his chest. He had been living a lie. His father had built an empire, not on honesty, but on secrets, manipulation, and hidden truths. And now that empire was crumbling around him. Before he could process any more, he heard the sound of footsteps outside the door. Nathan quickly shoved the folder back into its place and tried to calm his racing heart. But it was too late. The door swung open and Richard Bennett stepped inside. His cold eyes immediately locked onto Nathan's. "What are you doing here?" Richard's voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it that made Nathan's heart skip. Nathan stood motionless for a moment, his mind scrambling for words. He had been caught, but there was no turning back now. He had to confront his father. "I know about Eliza," Nathan said, his voice steady but strained. "I know the truth. She's your daughter, isn't she? My sister." Richard's expression didn't change, but Nathan could see the flicker of surprise in his father's eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You don't have to lie anymore," Nathan pressed. "I've seen the family tree. I've seen the photographs. You can't hide it from me any longer." Richard took a step closer, his gaze cold and calculating. "You've made a grave mistake, Nathan. Some things are better left buried. You don't want to know the truth. You don't want to understand why Eliza is here, why this marriage was necessary. I never wanted it to go this far, but it has, and there's no going back." Nathan felt the weight of his father's words, but he refused to back down. "You've kept me in the dark my whole life. You've lied to me, used me for your own agenda. I want answers, and I want them now." Richard's lips twisted into a grim smile. "You think you want the truth, Nathan. You have no idea what you're asking for." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. "Tell me then. Tell me everything. I need to know. You owe me that." Richard took another step forward, his presence overwhelming. "What I owe you, Nathan, is far beyond anything you can imagine. But be careful. Once you start digging, there's no turning back. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed." The silence that followed hung heavy in the air, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Nathan stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. His father's words echoed in his mind, like a distant warning. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. But it was too late. The door had already been opened. He had uncovered the truth, and there was no turning back now. Richard's eyes bored into him, cold and unwavering. He didn't seem angry. No, not anger. What Nathan saw was something much darker: resignation, fear, and perhaps something else. Regret. You don't understand what you've done, Richard said quietly, his voice calm but edged with an authority that made the hairs on the back of Nathan's neck stand up. You never have. Nathan took a step forward, his voice rising, a rawness creeping into his words. I understand enough. I understand that you've been lying to me my whole life. You've hidden the truth, kept me in the dark. You've used me, manipulated me, and I won't stand for it any longer. Not when the truth is staring me in the face. Richard's gaze hardened. You think you know the truth, Nathan, but you're only scratching the surface. You don't know everything. You can't. Nathan's mind raced, his thoughts swirling. Like a storm. What do you mean? What don't I know? I know about Eliza. I know she's your daughter. I know she's been living in this house, pretending to be some beggar you've taken pity on. But what's the real reason? Why did you make me marry her? Richard's lips pressed into a thin line, his jaw tightening. For the first time, Nathan saw a flicker of something in his father's eyes, a vulnerability, a flicker of humanity that Nathan had never seen before. It was fleeting, but it was there. And in that moment, Nathan understood something crucial. Richard wasn't untouchable. He wasn't the all-powerful, emotionless patriarch he had seemed for so long. He was just a man, and he had made mistakes, grave. It's not what you think, Nathan, Richard said, his voice strained, as though it physically pained him to speak the words. You think this is about power, about control, about me keeping you under my thumb, but it's not. This is about survival. Survival? Nathan echoed, his disbelief palpable. What are you talking about? Richard took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of years of secrets was finally catching up with him. I did what I had to do, Nathan. You don't understand the world I've been living in. I had to make choices, difficult ones, ones that in the end would protect this family, would protect you. Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He had never heard his father speak like this. Never. Richard Bennett had always been the man. In control, the one who made the decisions, the one who wielded power. But now he sounded vulnerable. Was it guilt, regret? Nathan couldn't quite tell. You've been keeping me in the dark, controlling me my entire life, and now you're telling me you were doing it to protect me. Nathan's voice was thick, with contempt. From what? What could be so bad that you had to lie to me, to manipulate me, to make me marry a woman I thought was a stranger? Richard's expression shifted, and for the first time, Nathan saw the cracks in his father's armor. I didn't want this for you, Richard murmured. I didn't want any of this. But Eliza, she's not just my daughter. She's a link to a past I thought I'd buried. A past that is coming back to haunt me, a past that has always been there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to destroy everything I've built. Nathan's mind raced, trying to make sense of his father's words. What past? What are you talking about? Why didn't you just tell me the truth? Richard's gaze darkened, and he stepped closer to Nathan, lowering his voice to a near whisper. Because telling you the truth would have put everything in danger. It would have torn this family apart, and it would have destroyed you. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let you get caught in the mess I made. Nathan's confusion deepened. A mess you made? What mess, Father? What did you do? Richard took a step back, his eyes hardening again. There are things, Nathan, things in this world that you don't understand. Powerful people, dangerous people who won't hesitate to tear everything down. And Eliza, she's the key to all of it. She's the reason they've been after me for years. She's the reason they'll never stop coming for us. Nathan's heart pounded in his chest. You're telling me that Eliza is the reason people have been after you, that she's the key to whatever mess you've gotten yourself into? Richard nodded solemnly. Yes, you're not wrong about her being my daughter. But she's also my protection. She's the reason they haven't killed me already. Nathan's head spun. What do you mean? Who are these people? Richard's expression darkened further, and his gaze darted toward the door as if he feared someone might be listening. I don't have time to explain everything right now, but you need to understand something. Eliza is not just some innocent woman. She's part of something much bigger, something that started before you were born. Nathan's stomach churned. What are you talking about? Richard took a deep breath, his fingers running through his hair in frustration. Years ago, I made a deal with the wrong people, powerful people who don't care about morals, who only care about their own gain. Eliza. She's a daughter of someone I wronged, someone who promised revenge, and for years I've been trying to keep my past buried, keep her out of the equation. But she's here now, and they've found us. Nathan's mind was reeling. His father was admitting to something so terrible, something so far beyond his understanding that he couldn't process it. You made a deal with criminals. You betrayed someone. Richard nodded slowly. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I thought I could control it, but I was wrong. I thought I could protect you from it. But now they've found Eliza, and they'll use her against me if they have to. They'll use her against all of us. Nathan felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. His father's world, the world he had always believed to be built on hard work and ambition, was based on lies, betrayal, and now survival at any cost. The weight of it all crashed down on him. Why didn't you tell me this before? Nathan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you warn me? Because you weren't ready to know the truth, Richard said, his voice strained. I kept you in the dark because I wanted to protect you from this life, from the dangers that come with it. But now it's too late. Now you're in this whether you like it or not. Nathan's heart pounded as the pieces slowly began to fit together. The truth was darker than anything he had imagined. Eliza was not just his wife, not just the woman he had been forced to marry. She was a pawn in a much larger game, a game that his father had started long before Nathan had ever understood the consequences of his actions. And now they were all in danger. The realization hit Nathan like a ton of bricks. His father, the man he had once idolized, was a part of something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And he, Nathan, had just walked straight into the heart of it. Nathan's mind felt like a storm, a maelstrom of disbelief, anger, and confusion. The world he had known, the life he had lived, the man he had idolized, was all a lie. His father's past, the secrets, the dangerous people, and the sacrifices made to protect their family, it was all too much. But now, with the full weight of the truth pressing down on him, Nathan knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. Not now. His father's words from the night before echoed in his mind. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. It was true. Once he had started digging, he had unearthed a truth that would change everything. And now that he knew what was at stake, there was no escaping it. But the question remained, what was he going to do with this knowledge? What choices would he make? And most terrifying of all, what would the consequences be? Nathan sat in the library the following morning, his hands resting on the cold surface of the polished wood desk. The large windows of the study offered a view of the expansive grounds, but Nathan barely noticed the beauty of the scene before him. His mind was still wrestling with the magnitude of what he had learned. Eliza, the woman he had been forced to marry, wasn't just a victim. She wasn't just some pawn his father had brought into his life for reasons unknown. No, she was part of something far darker, a legacy of betrayal that went back years, a legacy Nathan had unknowingly inherited. His father had made a deal with criminals, a dangerous deal, one that involved Eliza's mother and a past filled with secrets, lies and death. The truth of it, the consequences of that past, lay heavy on Nathan's chest. He had tried to reach Eliza, tried to understand her, but every time they spoke, the distance between them grew wider. She was as trapped in this nightmare as he was, and yet she was always holding something back. What was she hiding? What did she know that he still didn't? Nathan's hand gripped the edge of the desk. There was only one way forward. He had to confront her. He had to hear her side of the story, hear the full truth from her lips. If she was the key to everything, if she held the answers, then he had to know what they were. With a sense of grim determination, Nathan stood up and left. The study, he found Eliza in the garden again, just as he had the day before. She was sitting on the same bench, staring off into the distance, her expression distant and unreadable. "Eliza," Nathan called softly as he approached. She turned to him, her eyes weary but sharp. "What do you want now?" she asked, her tone guarded, as though she were ready for a fight. Nathan swallowed hard. "I need to know everything. I need to understand. You told me last night that I needed to make a choice. Well, I've made it. I can't go on like this. I need to know why my father did what he did. I need to know who you really are." Eliza looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously. For a long moment she said nothing. Nathan's impatience was growing, but he knew that pushing her would only make her shut down. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what you're asking, Nathan. You have no idea what you're asking for." "I'm asking for the truth," Nathan replied, his voice firm. "I'm asking for the truth about my father, about you, about all of it. I don't care about the consequences anymore. I need to know." She hesitated, then let out a long, drawn-out sigh. "You want the truth? Fine, I'll tell you, but you might not like it. You might not want to hear it." Nathan nodded, urging her to continue. His heart was pounding in his chest. His mind, filled with 1,000 questions. "My mother, Lily Bennett," Eliza began, her voice shaking slightly. "She wasn't just some woman your father met once. She wasn't just a brief affair. She was his first love, the woman he was going to marry. But my mother was tied to people who were far more dangerous than your father ever realized." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He had always wondered about the mysterious woman in the photograph, his mother, Lily Bennett. But now Eliza was telling him something he could never have imagined. "My mother was the daughter of a man who controlled much of the underground world," Eliza continued, her eyes darkening as she spoke. "A powerful man who made his fortune through illegal dealings, and when Richard Bennett crossed him, it set off a chain of events that neither of them could escape. They were in love, but it was a forbidden love, a love that your father thought would destroy him if anyone found out." Nathan felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. His world was crumbling piece by piece. "Eliza, what does this have to do with you? Why are you part of this?" he asked, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Eliza's face tightened, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. "I'm part of this because my father, my real father, he wanted revenge on Richard, and he used me to get it. For years, he tried to take everything from Richard. First, it was his business, then it was his reputation, and finally it was me." Nathan was stunned. "So, you're telling me that your real father, he's the one who's been pulling the strings all this time? He's the one who manipulated my father?" Eliza nodded, her face pale. "Yes, and now, with you and me, it's his final play. He's using us, Nathan. He's using our marriage to tear everything down, your father's empire, our lives, all of it." Nathan's stomach churned. The web of lies and betrayal had entangled him and Eliza both, pulling them into a nightmare neither of them had chosen. "We have to stop this," Nathan said, his voice filled with urgency. "We can't let it happen. We have to stop him before he destroys everything." Eliza looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness. "It's too late for that, Nathan. He's already won." "No," Nathan replied, shaking his head. "We can fight this. We have to." The two of them stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the truth settling between them. They were both pawns in a game much larger than either of them had realized. But now they had the truth. They had the key to stop it. Nathan took a deep breath. "We can take control of this. Together, we can stop my father from tearing everything apart. We don't have to play by his rules anymore. It's time for us to take our lives back." Eliza's expression softened, her eyes filled with something new. Hope. She nodded slowly. "You're right. It's time to take back what's ours." And with that, they turned to face the future, a future that for the first time felt like it was theirs to shape. The final part of the story resolves the long-standing mystery, unveiling the tangled web of lies, betrayal, and power struggles that have dominated Nathan's life. The emotional climax comes when Nathan and Eliza decide to take control of their own destinies, defying their pasts and the power structures that sought to control them. This final part ties up the central conflict and leaves room for reflection, with Nathan and Eliza standing together against the darkness of their pasts, ready to rebuild their lives. The end.